I just want to get out of the way first. A lot of people say this is a filler episode and they don't like it. It's their least favorite episode. And I want to squash the hate. I want to squash the haters right now. Because like a lot happens for the main plot, and I get why they can see it as a filler episode. They kind of divulge from the main plot a lot, and not a lot. The only things that happen at the end have to do with the main plot. So I get that. But I think it's still great. It shows us so much, and we get so much from this episode. We get the Cabbage Man. We get Boomy. Iconic. We see Earthbending for the first time. We see a big city for the first time. This is the first big city we see. This is a great world building episode. We really see what it's like outside of these villages and what this world is. This really gives us so much insight into where we are and like how this world works. We see the trading, the mail system, the engineering, so many great things. I almost wanted to say the flying people, but that's in the live action. They do that when they combine everything, not in this one.
Yeah, that's
not
true.
in the real series.
I can't believe that happened.
We'll get there, guys. We're going to get there. We'll talk about that. But I do like that this is a simple episode. It's a simple plot. And a lot of people think it's almost too simple. They don't like it, but I like that we have Aang needs to do these 3, challenges.
Yeah.
And it really shows us how smart, like, I feel like a good thing this episode does is we see how smart every character is. Every character has their chance to shine. We see like Sokka has these great ideas. We see Aang like getting over these challenges. Everybody, I love it. It's so good. Let's see what else.
It's amazing. It really, I mean, to what you were saying, it's not the most things don't really happen like overall plot wise to like move the larger narrative forward, I guess, which also I feel like is a big problem now that a lot of people get hung up with in general with like a lot of media, and they're like, well, this thing wasn't doing whatever for the plot. And I wish I could remember the quote from James Cameron, but it was something along the lines of like, there was a scene in Avatar, The Blue People, one where
the blue people,
the execs were fighting back about this shot that was like a minute, like 30 seconds or a minute long of them flying wherever, and it was just supposed to be like an emotional character thing, and he's like, no, I wanted the shot in there because I wanted it in there because like I felt something, so I feel like other people are going to feel something about it, you know. And it's like, like you don't, not everything needs to be to move the plot forward. Like you need character and emotion and stuff, because if you don't have that, then the plot doesn't matter. Like if it's nothing but A to B, then you lose a lot
and it's boring.
Yeah, you lose the like art part of it and the story. That's not just they punched something or defeated the bad guy or whatever thing, you know. Like you need more than that, and this episode gives us a lot of that in really fun ways. And it's still like, again, I've noticed it with all of the episodes as we're rewatching them. It's wild how, I mean, like obviously like it's a 24-minute cartoon, so like it's not the longest thing ever, but they all go by so quickly and like put a decent amount in there, and it's so impressive every time.
We do. We get I forget how much we get in such a short amount of time. And going from the live action to this episode, you're like, oh my God, we got this in this sentence. We got this in this sentence. We got this in this sentence. And it just keeps moving, and it moves so fast, but you don't even realize you're moving that fast. It's amazing. All of a sudden you're like, oh wait, I learned all of this information, but I didn't even realize I learned it. Meanwhile, something that I think the live action does wrong is that they're spending like an hour monologue to tell you one thing.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, we get it. Okay, I know. Like I find myself saying that a lot. With this show, by the end, I'm like, wait, I didn't even know I knew those things because of this whole episode.
Learned so much, but it was all just fun because Aang's doing like a couple different challenges.
And it's all done so well and under the radar.
It's amazing.
It's so amazing.
We can get them into a quick recap of the episode, I suppose. So they show up at Umashu, right? They get to the gates. And as you were saying, we see a big city for the first time, which is awesome. The shot, like revealing the city, is just amazing.
It's so cool.
It's so cool. So we get that. We get them like sneaking into the city. And like you were saying, the Sokka comes up with the idea for the disguises, I believe. It's like, hey, we can do this, and this is how we'll get in, which is hilarious. And
mustache.
We see earthbending, and again, like we see earthbending for the first time. So now we've covered all of the elements, seeing them all being bent, which is rad. I like I love the stance and the style that they established for Earthbending right out the gate, which like
Right off the
is
gate, yeah.
reinforced throughout the episode. But again, one of my favorite recurring things that happens in the show is how they use bending for doors and like pathways and stuff, and like how
Mm-hmm.
the different nations have them to like keep people that aren't earthbenders out because like they have to bend the walls open to get in. And like that's just a recurring motif that I didn't really think about the first couple times I watched through the show. But ever since really noticing it at the air temple, and like it happens here, and it happens in a couple episodes, which we'll talk about when we get there with the fire temple. And like
Mm-hmm.
it's just a recurring theme, and like it's just so smart. Like it's such a like, yeah,
You're
of
right. I've
course
never
they,
really thought about that, but yeah.
yeah, but all of them have it. Like it happens with the air temple, it happens here. I have to assume there's an example of it happening in the Water Nation at some point. I'm sure I'll notice it
But
when we
like the
get there.
ice, I think of the ice. They
Yeah. And
okay.
it's like
The North Pole.
I
We'll
feel
get
like
there.
probably they do. I can't remember off the top of my
Mm-hmm.
head, but I'm like, it's got to be. There has to be. But
There's
yeah, and then
something, yeah.
we see it with the fire temple, and like it's just it's such a smart in-universe thing that like of course this would be a way for them to secure their whatever
Mm-hmm.
thing for each nation. And so we see that, we see the gates. They get let in after sneaking through, which is cool. I also
As
love the
Mr. Pippin Patalopsicopoulos,
yes, which is so
the second.
such a good name. I
No, the
can't even say
third.
it.
The third.
It's so good though.
Yeah, I was like, try saying that right now.
No, I'm not even gonna do it.
Not even
Um,
gonna try.
I love the visual bit too of Momo being in the hay, like the
As the
straw
ears.
hat. Yeah, and like
So
the
good.
guard like seeing him and being super confused whenever they first get in. Like that's so good.
So
Um,
funny. And I do
so
love
they
that
get through.
Katara too. She catches on immediately and is
Mhm.
so fast with that. She's like, and I'm June Pippin Papadopoulos.
Yeah, like she
I didn't
really
even know
sells
she
it.
heard it once and said it, but I just
Yeah.
like it shows how smart she is and how with it she is, and they're very
Mhm.
good at improvising.
Yeah, I feel like
Very
without
fast
her,
thinkers.
it definitely would have fallen apart instantly. There's no way the guards would have let them through. And they're like, oh. And then it's also a hilarious bit that they're like, Sokka, you can help your like elderly like grandpa
That's so
carry
good.
stuff. And he's like, yeah, carry my stuff, which is awesome. And so they get let in. We see, like you were talking about, how the delivery system works, which is again one of those
Mhm.
just super smart
It's
in-universe
so
world building
creative.
things that we see where it's like, oh, of course, like this is how they would do that. I say, of course, it's such an like they had to think of this, so like they had
Yeah,
to like
yeah.
come up
But it's
with
like a creative, and it shows that in this world, people are, very creative. They use engineering and they use how they use their bending in their daily life and how their
mhm,
bending helps them, and not just with fighting and not just with protecting themselves. They can use it
yeah,
to make their lives easier and efficient. And I think that's so creative and really cool. And a great little touch.
yeah, it really goes to show like how bending informs the world, like you were saying, beyond just fighting, like how it would
Mm-hmm.
really impact every section of life, and how they really think that through to like this isn't really an extreme, I guess that seems like a weird way to say it, but like they take it to its logical like conclusions and be like, okay, well,
Mm-hmm.
if they're able to use bending, how would that change how they move things around in a big city?
Mm-hmm.
And they think that through, and they're like, okay, well, we would do this. And so we get to see this huge um, delivery system, rail system. It's like roller coasters basically, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And so we get the
Which as a kid,
flashback.
you're like, I hope they're riding that.
Right, and of course
But
they
they
do.
do.
We get
Of
the
course they
flashback,
do.
and we see young Boomy and Aang playing on the chutes and them like racing through. Which also, like in hindsight, it's really funny the first time you're watching through the show, thinking about like who King Boomy would be, because obviously the reveal at the end is that like King Boomy is
Yeah.
young Boomy, right? And it's just like watching as an adult or like going through the second time, you're like, oh, this is the most obvious thing. Like, of course, the person they're
Yeah,
setting
like
up in
of
the
course it's him.
flashback is
But
gonna
as like
be
an
him.
8-year-old, I was like, I have no idea.
Yeah, you're like, ah, what? But his eyebrow is so funny. I love it the way like
But
how
yeah, they're like fuzzy.
they're so
Or
big,
they're
and he's
like,
got
what
the
are they?
like
They're like, yeah.
the huge
The
arc, and then
tooth.
his snort too. Which I think it's funny that his snort doesn't come back when he's old until after they reveal that he's Boomy,
Yes.
which is funny and like makes sense,
Hmm.
I guess, because it would be a super obvious giveaway like right
Yeah.
before.
Because they use that in the live action episode. We'll get to that. I keep giving
Yeah,
away,
they
but
do. They do do
like
that
that's his
before.
giveaway.
Yeah,
Hmm.
which I don't know. That episode's way longer too, though. So I mean, like, I
So
guess
long.
it would make, well, it's because they like wrap in like four different things. We'll get there.
What different things? We'll get
there.
there again.
So yeah, we get to see the flashback of them, which is cool. I love seeing young, I say young Aang as if he's not young the entire time, but like the
Yeah.
before times Aang, like before his
Yeah, like who
100
he
year
was
stint.
100 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool seeing that personality come through and how he's interacting with other people. Um, so that's fun. And then that leads into Aang being like, hey, we need to ride the chutes. And we get the funny sequence of the gang riding through the chutes and the dangers and them just causing a ridiculous amount of property damage. Like, I can't even imagine
So
how many,
good.
like, tens of thousands or millions of dollars, equivalent worth of property damage. They're just like
The poor guy's
mowing.
cabbages.
Yeah. And of course, the cabbages have to get wrecked. And so they get caught and they get thrown into
Hmm.
jail. Well, they get brought to the king of Amashu, who
Hmm.
he immediately notices who Aang is. And if you know to look
Yeah.
for it, you can see the recognition on his face. He's like,
Yes.
oh, like, which,
He's like
I mean, yeah, Aang looks the exact same that he did 100 years ago. So of
100
course
years ago.
so of course he's gonna recognize him, but he's really like curious about it. And so that's funny.
But to
I
think about it,
love,
he's like 100. He has to be like 112 also. Booming.
yeah.
Which
Yeah, 'cause
also,
I mean,
but in this universe,
people live
it's
so
known that
long.
people do live long. They can live
Yeah,
that
they have
long.
really extended lives, which is so
Hmm.
interesting to me. I mean, I guess it kind of, I don't, I don't know how much. I mean, it makes sense obviously, but it's just that it's a really. I like that they set that precedent early on. Like we're
Hmm.
5 episodes in, and it's like, well, clearly this dude's 100 plus easy. If
Yeah.
we're just taking that he was the same age as Aang, then yeah, he's 112 too. Maybe I always read him as being like a slightly older because he
Yeah.
feels like a year or two older than him in the
I was
flashback.
like, I was thinking like 114 or something.
Yeah, I don't, maybe it's the hair that makes me feel that, but I also was like,
Or
it
the
seems like
personality. He's so
yeah, he seems
strong.
like he's the like kind of like the kid that's a little bit older than you that's like, no, we got to try, this that like talks you into doing stuff you shouldn't do
Yes. Yeah.
necessarily. Like he has that vibe. So I feel like he's a little bit older. Either way,
I agree. I
dude is
agree.
really old by now.
Hey, Aspect listener. Enjoying the show?
Then be sure to subscribe here on The Aspect so you never miss an episode.
And check out more episodes and clips on our playlist here.
Thanks so much for watching, and
Lameo Hotman.